up, baby? Hey guys, Sam here, and today's video is going to be devoted entirely to a console that I wouldn't be surprised if you've never heard about or heard very little about until now. Yes, I'm talking about the Pokémon Mini, a console made by Nintendo that's dedicated entirely to Pokémon. Sounds weird on paper, but oddly brilliant at the same time, doesn't it? And before we begin, big shout out to the friendly, extremely talented Bird Keeper Toby for making this video a reality through our collab. You know, funny thing is, when I first heard about him, I honestly thought he was some crazy madman with an impeccable expertise on everything to do with birds, from robins to red kites. Bill Oddie, eat your heart out. The Pokémon Mini is perhaps one of Nintendo's most quirky, forgotten relics that was released in late 2001 in Japan and North America, with apparently a New York Pokémon World Store exclusive release, and then in Europe the following year in 2002. Back when I was 3 years old, and now I'm just a talentless hack who makes videos to pass time. Wait, that didn't sound nice. The system was available in 3 different colours, but with the unique twist of naming them after Pokémon found in the Johto region that primarily set the stage for the Gold, Silver and Crystal games. From the Smooching Purple, Whipper Blue to the Chikorita Green model, which I have in possession here and bought it alongside one game for £16 on eBay 2 years ago. And I'd say it fits well with my equally rare Game Boy Light. Aesthetically, the Pokémon Mini is small in design, especially when compared alongside the Game Boy Color still popular at the time, though similar in height with the Landscape horizontal Game Boy Advance that was all hip, new and amazing back in the day, even without a backlight. However, despite this, the Pokémon Mini is surprisingly bigger than you might expect from a technical standpoint. Inside, it boasts a legitimate 8-bit processor, a shock sensor, an infrared port for wireless connectivity, and tons of buttons, including the unusual C-shoulder button, all crammed inside this little machine. Almost reminds me of the VMU from the Sega Dreamcast. Now, as with any console popular or obscure, there was a library of specially developed games that were released on the Pokémon Mini. And as you could probably tell by the system's name, they're all relevant to the Pokémon series and were later featured on the Pokémon Channel spin-off on the GameCube. Cool! I have 2 titles that I own, and I'm honestly amazed at how tiny the cartridges are, particularly when stacked up to the classic Game Boy and even with the modern 3DS, but less slimmer, though it's still eye-catching to this day. Also located on the back of the system along with the cartridge slot is a special tab that protects the game from being taken out while being played, which is really freaking clever, though the original Game Boy had a similar mechanism with a small notch preventing users from ripping out their games. Perhaps in sheer frustration. So now we've talked about the console itself, how about we take a look at the 2 games that I have for the system. Yeah, I know, it's a pretty small number, but hey, this isn't a common device we're dealing with here. Pop in one AAA battery, a game of your desire, and Bob's your uncle. We're all good to go! This game is the pack-in title of the console, Pokémon Party Mini. Yeah, yeah! Ain't no party like a Pokémon party!
Yeah! Pikachu forever!
This game is basically a collection of mini-games making use of the system's features and was developed by Denusha, who actually made a couple of other Pokémon mini-games and the mobile trainer for use with the rare Game Boy mobile adapter. The first minigame is Pikachu's Rocket Start, where an Elekid is in charge of a race between your character, a Rattata, an Eevee, or even another Pikachu. The goal is to get Pikachu to start running as soon as the Elekid gives the command, when the system rumbles, and you can control the character by pressing any button or shaking the Pokémon Mini itself, taking advantage of one of its primary features. However, if you start before the command or lose the race, then, well, it's game over.
Yeah! Pikachu party!
Slowking's Judge is a doozy in concept. You must keep an eye out for whether the tennis ball has landed in or outside the court. The A button rules out and the B button rules in, though sometimes 2 balls might appear at the same time to trick the player and fly mid-air. So there's still a challenge to this minigame, even if it sounds very easy upon its initial play. Chansey's dribble sees you playing as the titular Pokemon reaching to the finish line with a football, and hitting the sides can cause you to lose control through rapid zigzag patterns. Fun stuff! Bellossom's dance has you dancing as, Belossom alongside 2 other Belossoms, and the aim is to match their routines in sync, from the D-pad to shaking the system when the other Pokemon jump. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to the 2016 remake of this game, where you're playing as a Rowlet and you need to copy the sick dabbing moves of your peers to strive well and prosper in the foreseeable future. Nintendo, if you're reading this, feel free to take my idea. Hitmonchan's boxing is a tight, competitive match against a Machop, and there is a lot of shaking over here. You must score as many points as possible, and the system will rumble when there are signs of the Machop fighting back, and when that happens, that's when you don't shake the system. Pretty decent overall. Finally, Sneasel's fake out involves the player playing basketball against another Sneasel, chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool. The big problem with this minigame is that it's multiplayer only, so I can't actually play it. And that's pretty disappointing. Seriously, do you know anybody else who has a Pokemon Mini? No, you don't. So please, stop lying, ya bish.
Quit your jibber jabber.
All in all, Pokemon Party Mini is a solid game, though it's essentially a glorified tech demo for the Pokemon Mini. But then again, why should that be detrimental to its reputation? Pilot Wings Resort was blasted for being a 3DS tech demo upon launch, and I enjoyed it.
Shigeru Miyamoto!
This is the most common game to find on this unusual console, most likely due to it being the packed-in title for every copy sold, and if you see it as part of a Pokemon Mini listing online, I'd say go ahead and bid for it alongside this game, as it isn't a bad, poisonous type, like a nasty, putrid Garbodor. Oh, isn't it so pretty? Last but not least, we have Pokemon Pinball Mini. Okay, so hands up if you remember the original Pokemon Pinball on the Game Boy Color. You don't? Well, it was a lot of great fun, and so many hours were wasted trying to reach the highest scores and catch Pokemon in this classic spin-off to the main series. And it even had Rumble capabilities integrated onto the cartridge itself. This version, as you could imagine, is stripped back to accompany the hardware of the Pokemon Mini, though it still boasts up to an impressive 90 levels in total. There are 3 modes to choose: the main quest mode with 70 stages, time attack where the 10 stages need to be completed in a limited set of time, and score attack where you need to achieve the target score on these 10 stages before the timer runs out. Nice. The aim of this game is to shoot your Pokeball inside special holes, known as Pokemon plungers, as well as achieve high scores, and the Diglett or Pikachu acts as the bumping mechanism guard. There are also stages where you get to catch Pokemon and add them to your exquisite Pokédex, in all its monochromatic glory. The game itself is mostly fun, even if a bit frustrating at times, but for what it's worth, its positive aspects do outweigh its opposite negative ones. Though, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'd rather just play the original Pokemon Pinball on the Game Boy Color, or better yet, Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire on the Game Boy Advance. Nintendo, can we please have a new Pokemon Pinball for the 3DS, please? 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 So, there you have it. The Pokemon Mini in its tiny, minuscule glory. Overall, I definitely say that it's an interesting artifact with all the portable consoles that have emerged since the dawn of video games. It's an idea that strangely had potential. Pokemon's popularity was at an all-time peak in the early 2000s, so a small platform to house a couple of special games would not hurt at all. Especially with all the money Nintendo and Game Freak were raking in. Now, obviously the system was not a runaway success. I mean, it was kind of doomed from the very start with its weak 8-bit powers, and you could already buy a Game Boy Advance at the time, so why settle for less? Yet, despite this, these games on the Pokemon Mini have a surprising charm to them. I'm not sure what it could be, but maybe their simple, unsophisticated nature is pretty reminiscent of early mobile phone games from the same time, such as Snake, Stack Attack, and the Nokia N-Gage. Nah, I'm just joking. I think it's really fascinating to see how in the space of 15 years, these portable games have evolved from rudimental quick twiddle sessions to full-blown marvellous experiences that aren't too far off from the traditional home consoles. Not to mention the phones, of course. Oh, I'm sorry, smartphones, and I'll be doing a special video on those types of spiffing delights in a future episode of this bloody fantastic jolly show. Stay tuned. But, of course, the Pokémon Mini isn't the only home to a vast majority of Pokémon spin-offs.
And of course, the side games are loved because they're set in weird and wacky worlds, like the world of Pokémon Mystery Dungeon that has you in the world of a talking Pokémon, or Pokémon Conquest that has you entering the land of the samurai.
Hey, Toby! Well, what I wanted is, do these spin-off games take place in the same world as the main Pokémon games?
Some do. Why don't we go and check out my video in the Ori region and I'll tell you all about it.
Awesome! I want to visit Ori, and you should click on the following link to come join us. Woo! 2, 1, go.
Shigeru Miyamoto!
Nothing. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Yes! That is going to look so cool on film. Hashtag swaganometry. Yeah, boy.